welcome to the Market Research Online Client Briefing Session. My name is Sarah and I'm the Industry Project Coordinator for this topic. And today we are joined by Anna Fisher, who is the General Manager and Director of Zonte's Footsteps. And essentially what we want to get out of this session today is a little bit of a story of Zonte's Footsteps, because they will be your client for this particular project and you'll be working on the business all throughout the semester. So we've got a couple of questions that we'd like to ask Anna, and also bear in mind that during the semester there will be an opportunity to ask her and her team questions as well if you feel like maybe you need a little bit more information or maybe something is unclear. So this is really just the starting point to give you a project scope for what we might be working on. So I guess we'll start with a brief story of maybe Zonte's Footsteps and sort of how you came to getting involved in the business and what the business is all about.
Okay. So Zonte's Footsteps started in 2003. It was originally set up by a group of vineyard owners down in Langhorne Creek who were struggling to sell their fruit. And so they brought in a group of, wine industry experts and used that as a means of growing the original brand. So the focus was actually originally very much export. And in 2008 with the GFC, obviously the business got a little bit more difficult, and so the original owners approached what I'm going to call the management group, which included myself. At that stage I was the general manager of the winery where they were producing the product. And there was 4 other business partners, and we basically bought the business out because we could see the potential in the brand. So so it was in business talk it was a management buyout. So we've then taken that business. At that stage it was at 9,000 cases, and we probably kick over 50,000 cases this year. So we've grown quite a bit in that 10 years. So in terms of what is Zonte's Footstep and how did that come about? So the original name Zonte's Footstep was because the very first vineyard planted down in Langhorne Creek on the property that we started in was actually a Zante currant, which is Zante. Because we wanted to, have that history behind what we were doing. It was planted there in the 1890s. And so you can't use the name Zante on a bottle of wine in the same way you can't use Shiraz on a Cabernet, or you can't use Champagne on white sparkling. Same issues apply. So we just changed the A to an O. Sounds pretty similar. And we became Zonte's. The footstep element was because when they were actually digging up the Zante currant to replant with Shiraz, which was Shiraz and Viognier, which were the original fruit planted in the vineyard, we actually found the Diprotodon footstep. So those guys that are studying, you can go and talk to the paleontology department. But basically a giant wombat footprint that was fossilised in the clay. That footprint's now, or was still on display at the South Australian Museum, at least up until a few years ago. So it's somewhere in South Australian Museum. So that's how we became Zonte's Footstep. Ironically now we do talk a little bit about the name Zonte's being linked to the fact that Zonte's in Greek is actually a name that people have. And it's a sort of a passionate person that moves upon instinct, so constantly looking for changes and a bit of fun and a bit of electricity and that sort of stuff. So we kind of play off the fact that even though the original name came from Zante currants, Zonte's actually has a meaning as a name which fits with our little team. So we're now proudly independent. There's myself and Brad, the owners now. Our core brand range, which is Zonte's Footstep, and you guys, of course, will do your research and look at the website for that, is basically believes in producing wine that's, for people to enjoy. So our core values as a business are basically LAF, we call it LAF, which is learning, creating the opportunity for exploration, authenticity, delivering as we promise, and that kind of bodes into a dependability around our product. free spirited. So we want to create, I guess, positive moments for people that are a little bit different, not necessarily sort of not staid. And a big one for us in our office is fun and enjoyment. So we like to laugh a lot and have a lot of fun, and that's a key part of who I guess the core business is. But ultimately, we are a wine company.
Yes. Great. No, it's a great story. Like the actual name of the business, it's got a fantastic story, and obviously encapsulates everything that your business is about. So you've been involved in it for quite some time, and you said going from 9,000 to 50,000. So obviously it has grown quite a lot over the years. Can you give us a bit of a picture as to what your current team looks like?
Yeah. So there's if I go on a pure headcount, I'd say there's 8 of us. We all have different roles. Some are contractors, some are employees, but there's sort of 8 of us within the group. And I better get this right because hopefully I've done this right. So Belinda, she's our production and export manager. So she's really in charge of making sure that everything from the wine gets into a beautiful packaging look, and she'll be a key part of the project in terms of what we're going to talk about later. We have Lauren, who is logistics and admin, and sort of domestic sales or local sales, we should say. Alice, who's our marketing coordinator, she really does all of our website, social media. She works with all our distribution in terms of any promotions that we're doing, that sort of stuff. How am I doing? That's 4 of us. No, it's 3. 3. Me, you've got me. My background's actually accounting. I have a CPA qualified accountant, but my original degree was ecotourism here at Flinders Uni, hence why I'm involved with you guys. General manager, jack of all trades. That's the way we go in small business. My business partner is Brad. He is really more sort of sales and marketing background. He is actually a qualified winemaker, but we call him a vigneron these days because he doesn't tend to get involved so much in the day-to-day winemaking. He's much more involved in the overarching, this is the style, this is what we're looking for. So that's the internal team, I guess. We then have Bella and Roy, who maybe we count them as one person. So they've basically been brought in to work with us on growing sales in China. Both are Chinese from China, and doing a fantastic job. We now have a WeChat account and a few other things, which is quite exciting. And then we have Marty, who is our winemaker day to day, as opposed to Brad, who's sort of a bit more outside of that. And we have Adam, who's our viticulturalist. So he works with all of our growers and makes sure that the fruit that we're receiving is how we want it to be.
Nice.
That was 8. If I made Bella and Roy one person.
Nice. And just in terms of, I guess your goals and ambitions for your business moving forward, where do you see, I guess yourself in the next, maybe year or 3 or 5 years, whatever timeline you've set for your business, and how do you see it fitting into what your current sort of team looks like, and maybe if there's any gaps or things that you might need to expand or to grow upon in terms of achieving that?
Yeah. So, on a personal level, my goal is that within 10 years, so I'm 40 at the moment, so there you go, secret. It's okay, I'm proud of my age. I'd like to, by the age of 50, be able to have the business running itself. So I actually like to get to the point where we are no longer required to work in the business, but can work on the business and other opportunities. And that's partly because my husband and I in particular like to do a lot of travel. So we keep talking about doing that sort of stuff. We'll talk a bit more about that when we get to the cans. But look, I guess, at the end of the day, we're in this business for lifestyle reasons in a lot of ways. Neither Brad or I are driven by this desire to make millions and millions of dollars. We're driven by the fact that we're doing something that we love, that gives us the time that we want with our families, that allows us to be challenged and enjoy what we're doing. So I guess it's an interesting question. We are growing rapidly. We've this year we're probably going to have grown by about 10 to 15% on last year. that's quite fast in the wine industry. One of the things you've got to remember is that it takes us 2 years to produce a product. So from when we actually prune the vineyards in, say, June of last year, we've only just crushed the fruit, and it will be another 18 months before we actually put it in bottle for red wines. So it's an interesting industry in that you're very restricted in terms of growth capacity because of what you can and can't produce over a 2-year period or 3-year period.
And so, speaking of the industry, so you have been in the industry for quite some time. So, what is your understanding of, I guess, the competitive landscape, and who you would consider to be, your main competitors as well? Any trends that you are seeing now in the industry that you might want to take advantage of, or what does that look like?
Okay. So I might split that into 2 parts. So we'll come back. Can you remind me to come back to the trends, because that's going to lead into the next bit. But I guess our industry is highly competitive. We have, and don't quote me on the exact number, but about 2,600 wine producers registered in Australia. And so on top of that, you've obviously got wine producers from France and Italy and the US. So just in Australia, we have 2,600 wine producers. It's a little bit hard to use that as a blanket number, though, because if you then look at the statistics, 5 of those companies, which are companies such as Treasury, Accolade, Australian Vintage Limited, Pernod Ricard, and Castella, got there. I know that was not good. Those 5 effectively make up just under 60% of the volume that's produced in Australia. Right. So, when you're talking about 2,600 producers, there's 5 that make up just under 60%. They used to talk about, and again, I'm not quite sure exactly what the stats now look like, but a few years ago there was a massive review done of our industry, and the top 38 made up basically just over 80% of the total volume produced in Australia. So that brings in people like Darrenberg and Angoves and a few other companies like Yalumba, people like that who are in that next sort of 38. Zontes aren't there yet. And then basically, so if you sort of put that into context, I think it works out about 12%. 12% of the volume produced in Australia is coming from the remaining 22,500 and whatever that works out at 60-something producers. So, there's a lot of tiny producers. There's a lot of small mum and dads. Basically, any time you produce wine, you have to have a producer's license. So there is some restriction in that. We would sit in what you classify as a medium-sized wine brand. In terms of scale, believe that Molly Duca, some of you may know of Molly Duca, did about 70,000 cases last year, and we're at 50,000. Okay. We're I believe, again, don't hold me to exact numbers, but did just under 200,000 cases, and we're at 50. So we're not tiny, but we're not big either in a lot of ways. Sorry, the second question was trends. So you do have to try and be a bit on the front foot. We off the back of we'll talk about our core brand first, and then we'll get into the cans. But we, in October last year, did a massive rebrand. So again, if you have a look on the website, you go into the history wines, you'll see the old branding. We actually changed the branding only in October this year. It took us 2 years to go through that rebranding process. We involved all of our distributors. There was a lot of research done around what is it that people are looking for. There was some work done by Sip and Save locally around when consumers walk into a retail store, what are they looking for? And hence the change from a very staid and fairly conservative wine brand to what we have now, which is very much about the label and grabbing a bottle of wine. So we used to talk always about how, we didn't want to get involved in a label war. We wanted to make sure that, our wine was just consistently, consistent and dependable. The reality is that, yes, that works to a degree, but we've certainly seen, in particular, Queensland and Victoria, since the launch of the new brand, almost a doubling of sales. So it's had a significant impact in terms of what we did with that rebranding. Something that came up, and actually it was a couple of years ago now, that came up sort of prior to the rebrand, and it's now become our next little baby project, is what I'm getting you guys to help us out with. So 2017, we packaged and did a prototype run of a product which is called Bolle Felici. It's a can. It's wine in a can. There you go. We've got some product. Come and see Sarah, she can show you it. But yeah, so we basically did it as a prototype. I do a lot of full driving with my husband. We do a lot of camping and a lot of outdoor activities, and as much as I don't mind drinking cider and beer, eventually you get to a point where I own a wine company. Surely I can put wine in a can so I can take it camping with me. You know, it was very much done. So preceding that, there was some market research we did using the business model canvas. I'm not sure if you guys touch on that. Working around Generation Y and their drinking habits and what they're looking at, and we focused in particular on 20-something females and what are the core things. We did some basic research, and in general, you know, the feedback was around events and social. So you know, that's an element I'll leave you guys to continue with. So we had that feedback. I obviously personally was quite interested in doing and creating something that was going to work for my things that I was doing. And at the same time, in America, the wine in a can was the fastest growing wine segment. So there was a few things that kind of all came together for us, and so we ran the prototype. We made a few mistakes. The can we did, it was 330ml. We do know that we have to do a 250ml or lower. So that's something that you don't need to research. That's a legal requirement. It basically needs to come in as under 2 standard drinks. So at the moment it sits at 2.8. You will notice on the can, if you look closely, that it says 3.8. We might have also stuffed that up, but it is only 2.8. But it's, you know, it's yeah, I mean, in terms of the actual product, I think it was heading very much in the right direction. It certainly fitted with a number of people. We just haven't been able to really spike it because of that issue, in particular with the 2 standard drinks.
Great. So yeah, you guys now know what your project scope is for the online topic. So we've obviously heard a little bit about Zonte's footsteps and how it came to being, and just some details about that business, but it's great that you guys are actually given the opportunity to focus on this brand new product. Could you tell us, in terms of the target market, so 20-somethings and perhaps females as well, how does that compare to your target market for Zonte's?
Okay, so it's definitely a younger demographic. Our biggest buyers through our direct mail these days are actually females between the age of 35 and 55. So that's Zonte's Footstep brand, online direct sales. So that's probably the best information that we have to work with. One of the challenges you have, if you can sort of perceive it this way, is, we sell to a distributor, the distributor sells to a retailer, and the retailer actually sells to our consumer. So there's a big gap for us between who our customer is, which is the distributor, and who actually ultimately consumes our product. So anecdotally, we presume that it's a similar portfolio mix as to our direct mail consumer. So direct consumers are people buying direct from us. They're providing us with, obviously basic details. So we get their dates of birth, we get their sex and that sort of stuff. So online sales are very much that 35 to 55-year-old female. We do know through some other work that we do with Laithwaite, which is a large direct-to-consumer, that their main customer is actually 45 to 75-year-old men. So, but they have actually they've sort of retained a more conservative package in terms of what they work with. So, so we've got a fairly broad spectrum in terms of Zonte's as a brand, but it's interesting to see where that fits. interestingly, with the cans, it was, the market research we did was around 20-something females. Probably the biggest consumer of those has actually turned out to be our standard target market, so the 35 to 55-year-old female. And largely, I think, because it's a lifestyle thing. So, for me personally, I don't necessarily want to open a whole bottle of wine. I just want to have a couple of glasses. So the beauty of having something like a can in the fridge is that you don't have to have a whole bottle. You don't open a bottle and go, oh God, now I've got to drink 6 glasses. You open a can and go, okay, well, I've got one. If I feel like a second one, that's awesome. If I don't, they're $8.50 a can. That's not, I can just whatever. That's fine. And, it's also something that, again, fitting into where I was targeting, which was around lifestyle choices. So for me, I can take the cans down the beach, I take a can to the footy, or to the netball court, or, whatever it might be. Doesn't look like it's alcoholic. Shouldn't say things like that. So, it's. I think the irony has been that even though the target market was that 20-something, we've probably ended up finding a product that fits really well for that 35 to 55-year-old female.
Great. And something I think is also important for students is a little bit about your marketing and the digital side of your business. So can you briefly run us through what you are doing from that marketing perspective in terms of, e-commerce, social media, your website and stuff like that, and how, with the launch of this Wine in a Can in the coming months, how you see that working alongside your main brand, or whether or not you envisage it to be something completely separate?
I guess this is where your fun comes in. Hey, okay, so the answer to that is I don't know. The answer is at the moment for Zonte's Footstep, we have a website, we have an online store. We do have the cans on that website, although they're kind of hidden deep down inside.
I didn't see them when I went on the website.
They're hidden deep down inside. We did originally, when we first brought out the cans, we've set up we've actually registered a couple of domain names. Obviously, Bolle was one of those elements that we've registered, but we're not really sure. The Bolle name came from, which Bolle Felici means happy bubbles in Italian. So, and I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but that's what it means. And so that was actually part of our core product range. So we actually have a bottle of that wine. With the new packaging that we're talking about doing, we are not fixated on it being part of the Zonte's core range. It could be an entirely separate product. We are, I'm certainly keen to look at names that would sell. Something, there's a few different companies that have brought out cans already. I'm just having a mental blank as to what Rose's business name is. Rose Kentish and a friend of hers have brought out a brand with wine, but it's actually beer, cider, bubbles, which is all very message driven. So they're very much in support of various different things that they're wanting to put funding towards. So they're very strong on the ethical element, which is fantastic. I think it's great that she's doing it. In terms of where we sit with it, look, in a lot of ways, we're going to be taking some of the research that you guys are doing to help guide that. It could be that it's a sub brand of Zonte's Footstep if it fits well enough with our core range, or it could just be a completely different product that sits totally to the left of it. So we're sort of open for that in terms of what that may actually end up looking like.
So it could even have its own separate website.
Could have its completely own website.
Right.
In a lot of ways, I would suggest it probably will have its own life. Even if it's a sub tier of Zonte's Footstep, I'd imagine it's still going to have its own Instagram page. It's going to have its own and hashtags and things like that, because the Zonte's page is very focused on the new labels and all the new products. And if you guys, I presume, will all jump onto those and have a look and follow us. And so with that, I think it's going to struggle to sit under the Zonte's core range, but you guys may tell me otherwise. I think that's part of the fun of it,
Yeah.
is that, you know, we're going to have to do this, you know, the packaging I think looks really nice as it is. It's certainly got some level of presence about it, but, you know, not enough of a presence that we wouldn't be prepared to go completely left of where we are at the moment.
A client that's open to new ideas and feedback.
Watch out.
So I guess that does fit in quite nicely to the scope that maybe some of these groups could take. So you know, you all know that you will be working in small teams for this online topic, and each team will be taking on a different focus so that we can get the most out of this, you know, for Anna and for the business as well. And so the information is not repetitive at all, and it makes it just, you know, a little bit more interesting. So in terms of where you see this going, so you mentioned things like, you know, events, retail stores, and also that more corporate side as well, maybe sporting events. And so do you want to detail a little bit more about, where you see this actually being placed?
Okay. So I guess the two main markets, or the two main targets for us in terms of volume. So just in terms of clarification there, you know, the cans are going to have to end up being a volume product. So if you look at your margins and you look at where the product sits, you're going to, you know, the ultimate goal with cans has got to be to get the volume up. So you're really therefore restricting in some ways yourself to places like Dan Murphy's. So whether it's Dan Murphy's or whether it's your retail, you know, front end retail stores, but also things like events. So you think about like Adelaide Oval, for example. You know, there's no glassware allowed. There's no, you know, all this sort of stuff. So cans are a fantastic solution to that. And really, that's where we've hit a brick wall with the two standard drinks in both those scenarios. So part of the brief is that whatever we end up with has to be under two standard drinks. The current product, which is a Prosecco, is 11% alcohol, which theoretically means that our can needs to be somewhere between 200 and 250 ml. So that's going to be the same for any other products that we do within the range. We are talking about doing not just the bubbles, but doing a bubbles, a white, a rosé, and a red. In terms of what those products look like, you know, in some ways we currently have a range of products that we make, and pretty much any of those could be turned into canned product. Although it's less likely to be regional specific. So it might be, say, at the moment we make an Adelaide Hills Sauv Blanc as an example. It may become a generic Sauv Blanc. Because that way it gives us more access to volumetric amounts. Sorry, I got a bit distracted there, but in terms of events and retail, that's your volume movers. So that's really where you need to end up in terms of what you're doing. The reason I mentioned Adelaide Oval is what we have found with the existing product is that some of the most popular places it's actually being sold are in local sporting venues. So surf clubs, footy clubs, netball, footy/netball clubs when they're associated. So basically places where they've got a licence, they don't really want people outside with glass, and so it gives people an opportunity to buy something that they can actually then use outdoors in a lot of ways. So it comes back to that outdoor element.
Yeah. And so I guess from that perspective, and correct me if I'm wrong, but some of the things that students could look at in their teams are things like who the competitors are in this space. So, you know, you are competing, you know, if you've got sporting events, and you are competing for that space as well. What you notice about the packaging, so things like, you know, the appearance of it, you know, if there are any, if you're open to any changes to the actual packaging itself in terms of colour and appearance and graphics and stuff like that. So that's something that you could do some research on. Information you find about the target audience as well, maybe the general price range and some of the flavours and types of wine in a can that's maybe commonly seen. As well, what channels are being used to actually sell it, and also this concept of, you know, brand personality as well. So what sort of personality, if you are thinking of making it into a separate website and having its own, you know, sub-brand, what sort of personality is that likely to take on as well? So maybe looking at I don't know, some past, success stories or things that worked really well that maybe you could adopt too. So these are all things that you guys can discuss with NASA, who's your lecturer and topic coordinator, in terms of what group takes on what particular focus. But yeah, I think that does give you a solid scope for the project. Is there anything else you wanted to add? I guess in terms of like maybe limitations. Do you have any limitations in terms of time you can allocate to it, or things like budget or human resources, or anything that the students should bear in mind when putting this together?
Look, not so much. I just be aware I do travel a little bit, so I'm away for quite a bit of April on work trips in Australia, so it's not too bad. I'm then away again later in the semester. So just being aware that, yes, I'll do my best to get back to you guys as quickly as I can, but sometimes I might be caught up in doing other stuff. I guess the main thing, this is an opportunity. We're basically at the moment just moving through the final few cases of the Prosecco that we have, or from the bubbles that we currently have. We're looking at launching this new product in September, October this year. So, we will be looking at doing production from about June. So, in terms of the timing of what you guys have got to do with regards to the research and where we go in terms of, packaging and all that sort of stuff, it's an opportunity to actually see some of the work you guys are doing coming through into those products. We may not be able to take on everything. We will have limitations around what we can and can't do. And a good example of that might be the package design, because, for us to actually do a can that's fully skinned, as the current one is, your minimum units on that is 80,000 cans. Whereas if we can come up with a design that has a silver can, my minimum units on that is 10. So, there's some stuff around, what the design may end up looking like. But ultimately, we're looking for things like, colour, profile, I like the word you're using around brand personality, like what's that about? Something to be aware of when you're doing your research is that there's quite strict legislation around what things you can and can't put in association with alcohol. So something to think about is, because it's considered a depressant, you can't use words that are going to imply that it's going to make people happy, as we may have done. So there's lots of things to learn in it. But yeah, I'm actually quite looking forward to seeing what you guys will come up with in the various different areas that you're looking, and hopefully we can use some of that to feed into what we end up making a decision about in 6 months' time. And
Anna has also taken on many students now through industry placements. How many students?
We did actually add it up. We sat there and went, okay, we've had 1, 2, 3, a lot.
A lot. So I know you are online students as well, but if this is a project that's really interested you, or if you stand out as someone that is interested in doing a placement as well, there always is that opportunity, maybe after this project, if you like what you've been working on, and if Anna thinks it would be a great fit, then maybe one of you could also help to see some of these recommendations through a little bit later on through an industry placement as well. So that's something to bear in mind too as you move through the project. But yeah, I think that that's a good start, and we can also get in touch with Alice, as we said, who's doing marketing for the business. So maybe if you're not available for questions, Alice will be as well. So great. Well, thank you so much for your time. That's very exciting. All right. Well, we'll see you guys later.
See ya.